Proverbs says the prudent see danger and take refuge. And right now, millions are doing exactly that without saying a word. They are leaving conversations, platforms, and public life not because they stopped caring, but because they stopped trusting what they see. Luke records people saying, "We don't want this man to be our king," not as a riot, but as a refusal formed after watching too much. This is what disappearance looks like when people believe every option is compromised. No protest, no exit speech, just silence that spreads. People are disappearing without telling anyone, and most observers keep calling it apathy. Proverbs says the prudent see danger and take refuge, and that word refuge matters here more than most people realize. Refuge is not a protest. Refuge is not a statement. It is a decision to reduce exposure when the environment feels unsafe to navigate openly. In the current climate, danger is not physical for most people. It is reputational. It is social. It is psychological. Speaking now carries costs that feel unpredictable and unevenly applied. Silence feels cheaper. Distance feels cleaner. This is why disappearance looks so calm from the outside. People do not storm out of conversations or announce dramatic exits. They fade. They stop posting. They stop answering. They stop explaining their positions to anyone. They are not disengaging because they lack opinions or convictions. They are disengaging because every opinion feels searchable, permanent, and usable against them later. Proverbs does not describe panic in this moment. It describes calculation. The prudent notice patterns over time and quietly adjust where they stand. This behavior feels modern because the tools are modern, but the response itself is old. People have always disappeared when systems felt unstable, and the Bible records this without urgency or outrage. It presents withdrawal as a recurring human response to perceived danger, not as a unique failure of one generation. Across history, collapse rarely begins with chaos or violence. It begins with thinning. Fewer voices speak honestly in shared spaces. Fewer people stand visibly when stakes rise. Fewer invest themselves fully in outcomes they no longer trust. Participation becomes selective. Risk is weighed constantly. Silence spreads without coordination or agreement. This is not fear in the dramatic sense people expect. It is restraint shaped by memory. People remember what happened the last time they spoke freely, trusted publicly, or aligned themselves openly. Luke records people sending a message instead of showing up, and that detail carries weight. Distance replaces dialogue. Indirect communication replaces presence. Withdrawal happens early while outcomes are still uncertain and before pressure becomes unavoidable. Scripture does not frame this as wisdom or rebellion. It records it as repetition. The Bible does not describe this phase with urgency. It describes it with restraint and observation. Proverbs notes the prudent taking refuge, not praising them and not condemning them, simply recording the movement. Luke records a message sent from a distance, not a confrontation, not a debate, not a negotiation. Scripture does not rush to explain motives or justify outcomes. It documents behavior and allows the pattern to speak over time. Modern readers often expect collapse to look loud, sudden, and unmistakable. The Bible rarely presents it that way. Instead, it shows engagement thinning long before structures fail. People stop showing up long before they stop believing anything internally. Withdrawal precedes breakdown. Silence comes before disorder. These texts do not frame disappearance as virtue or vice. They frame it as signal. When disappearance becomes a pattern, the damage is not immediate or obvious. It is delayed, subtle, and often misdiagnosed. Silence gets mistaken for maturity. Distance gets mistaken for clarity. The Bible treats silence as a behavioral outcome, not an emotional state or moral position. As more people withdraw, those who remain visible start speaking into emptier rooms. Feedback loops weaken. Correction disappears. Nuance evaporates. Extremes feel more common than they actually are because moderating voices have already stepped back. This distorts perception for everyone involved. The environment feels harsher, louder, and more dangerous, which justifies further withdrawal. The pattern feeds itself without needing coordination. Psychologically, this is how people feel detached without feeling broken. They tell themselves they're opting out temporarily. Proverbs allows that framing at first. The prudent take refuge. But the text does not say they return. That absence matters. Refuge without re-entry slowly becomes isolation, even when the original reasons felt rational and measured. When engagement is replaced by indirect signals, relationships thin out. Trust cannot be repaired because it is never tested again. People observe instead of participate. Over time, observation replaces belonging. Participation begins to feel unsafe by default. Once withdrawal becomes normal, it changes how reality itself is interpreted. Silence starts to look like intelligence. Distance starts to feel like discernment. Engagement starts to feel reckless or naive. As more people disappear, the few who remain visible carry disproportionate weight. Their words define the atmosphere. Their tone sets the temperature. Public life feels extreme even if most people aren't. This reinforces retreat for those still watching. At this stage, disappearance becomes preventative rather than reactive. People step back before anything even happens. They anticipate misinterpretation. They anticipate reputational damage. They anticipate consequences for association alone. Withdrawal comes before demands are made or lines are drawn. People feel informed but uninvolved, safe but disconnected, calm but detached. Nothing snaps, nothing announces itself. The pressure simply accumulates quietly. Disappearance stops being a response and becomes a condition people live inside. They no longer remember what full participation felt like. They only remember why they left. The original danger becomes abstract, but the refuge remains concrete. Scripture often marks danger not by what appears, but by what quietly leaves the center. When voices thin out, responsibility concentrates. When responsibility concentrates, trust becomes heavier and harder to place anywhere. Systems hollow without collapsing outright. The structure still stands, the surface still functions, but fewer people feel ownership inside it. Withdrawal becomes self-justifying. People point to noise as proof they were right to leave. They point to instability as evidence that silence is wisdom. The loop closes without anyone intending it. Refuge reshapes the landscape itself. The Bible never shows what happens when everyone takes refuge. It only shows the movement into silence, then continues with the people who stepped back. They are not condemned, they are not restored, they are simply no longer present in the center of the story. Scripture warns by documenting absence. It shows how easily prudence becomes permanence, how quickly refuge becomes posture. Nothing suggests the danger fully passes. It only shows that fewer people remain visible when visibility finally matters. And the question the text leaves unanswered lingers longer than most people expect. When enough people step back to stay safe, who is left shaping what comes next?